Okay, yeah, I could see. How is it now?
Mm. Can you be a little bit bigger?
Still bigger. Okay,
Yes, thank you.
okay. Now I have to back up to see. Okay, so this sutta gives advice for what to do, for how to handle the problem of drowsiness in meditation. And it's given as the Buddha's advice to Maha Moggallana. As we know, Maha Moggallana became one of the two chief disciples of the Buddha. And apparently, this sutta must take place between the time when Sariputta and Moggallana first joined the Buddha and became ordained, entered into the Buddhist monastic order under the Buddha, and the time when Sariputta and Moggallana were appointed the two chief disciples, because they were appointed the two chief disciples after attaining arahantship. And if they were arahats, if Moggallana was an arahat, he wouldn't have had the problem with drowsiness or dozing while he was doing meditation. So according to the tradition, I think this is in the commentaries, both Sariputta and Moggallana achieved the first stage of realization, the stage of stream entry, even before they met the Buddha. And so Sariputta, when he was still a wandering ascetic looking for a liberating teaching, he saw one of the first five Arahat disciples of the Buddha, the monk Assaji, the Venerable Assaji. And then he was impressed by Assaji's manner, his deportment, the way he was walking, stopping on his alms round in front of the houses. And so Sariputta thought, this monk really knows something. And so he waited until Assaji had finished his alms round, went off for his meal, finished his meal. And then Sariputta approached him and said to him, or asked him, I'm very, very impressed by your manner. Who is your teacher and what is his teaching? And this would have been very soon after the Buddha's enlightenment, probably in the first, I think, period after the first Vasa, after the enlightenment. And so Assaji replied to the young Sariputta, he said, my teacher is the one who has gone forth from the Sakyan clan. They know him as the ascetic Gotama, but we call him the Bhagava, the Blessed One. And then Sariputta said, but what is his teaching? Tell me the teaching. And Assaji, though he was an arhat, he was very humble, very modest. And so he just said, well, even though he's an arhat, he said, I'm just a beginner in this Dhamma. I don't really know it very thoroughly, and so I can't explain it to you in detail. And then Sariputta said, I don't need the details, just tell me the essence. And then Assaji recited a 4-line verse, which becomes almost the perfect, excuse me, the perfect epitome of the Buddha's teaching. Ye Dhamma hetu pabhava, te sang hetung tatagato aha, yocha so te sang nirodo, evang vadi mahasamano. So whatever dhammas, whatever things there are that originate from a cause, the Tathagata declares or explains their cause. And he also explains that which is their cessation. Such is the doctrine of the great ascetic. And as soon as Sariputta heard that four-line stanza, boom, his Dharma eye opened up and he saw the deathless Nibbana and became a stream enterer. And then he asked, right after that, he asked Asaji, he said, excellent, excellent. So this just took place, a kind of, we call it instantaneous enlightenment, momentary enlightenment. He didn't have to go off and practice Satipatthana for 7 days, but he just heard those 4 lines, and immediately it was like the darkness of delusion just dropped away from the mind, and the mind was flooded with the light of panya, or wisdom. But he didn't want to just go off and go to the Buddha. And so he asked Asaji, where is your teacher now dwelling? And then Asaji replied, he's now living in the bamboo grove. They were near Rajagaha. So he's living in the bamboo grove. And then Sariputta said to him, you can return to the bamboo grove. I have to meet a friend and tell him what I've learned. And so Sariputta went off and found Moggallana. At that time, the text referred to him by his given name, Kolita. And as soon as Moggallana saw Sariputta approaching from the distance, he realized my friend's whole expression is changed. His face is different. His movements are different. The look in his eyes is different. And he said to Sariputta, have you found it? Have you found it? Have you found the way to the deathless? And Sariputta said, yes, I found it. And then he related to him that I met this ascetic, this monk Asaji, and he told me about his master, the ascetic Gotama, who he calls Bhagava, the Blessed One. And he told me the essence of his teacher's teaching. And then Sariputta recited that same 4-line stanza. And on hearing it, Moggallana's my eye of wisdom also opened up. And he penetrated right there while listening to that 4-line verse. He penetrated to the truth of the Dhamma and attained stream entry, Sotapatti. And then the two of them said, let's go meet our master. And so they set off from the outskirts of the town. They set off for the bamboo grove. And as they're approaching the bamboo grove, the Buddha is sitting on his Dharma seat, surrounded by the few monks that he has, since this is the beginning of the dispensation. And when he sees those 2 young men coming in the distance, he calls the attention of the Sangha to those 2 men coming, and he says, do you see those 2 ascetics coming towards us? Those 2 will become my chief disciples, an excellent pair. And then the 2 came to the Buddha, that bowed down to him and requested to be accepted into his monastic order. And then Sariputta said, welcome. You come into the order and practice this path to the complete liberation from dukkha. And so then they became the bhikkhus, Sariputta and Moggallana. And then each of them, probably after getting some further instructions from the Buddha, they went off on their own to practice their meditation. And it said that Moggallana took 7 days to reach arahantship, and Sariputta took 14 days, so 2 weeks to reach arahantship. It's not that Sariputta's faculties were duller than those of Moggallana. Actually, Sariputta was the one with the sharper wisdom, but it seems that, at least according to the commentary, to become the chief disciple with a specialization in panya or wisdom, Sariputta had to investigate many more dhammas, many more phenomena or principles, looking at them from a great variety of perspectives or angles in order to get a very comprehensive understanding of the multiple dimensions of the Dhamma. Whereas Moggallana didn't develop his panya or wisdom to the same extent, but Moggallana, it seems, focused more on the development of strong samadhi, and then Moggallana's specialization became the iddhis, the psychic powers, where Sariputta's specialization was panya, wisdom, or insight. Okay, so this is a background to the sutta, which apparently must take place during that week when Moggallana has gone off after reaching stream entry, after meeting the Buddha, after being accepted into the Sangha. He's now gone off to develop his meditation with the aim of reaching arahantship. And so now the text says that he is at a place called Sungsu Maragira in the Deer Park at Basakala Grove. I don't know if those places have been located, but they must have been someplace in the vicinity of Rajagaha. Oh, I'm sorry, the Buddha was dwelling at Susumgaragira in the Deer Park here. And Moggallana was sitting at another place called Kala Vala Mutagama. Again, this must have been like on the outskirts of Rajagaha. And he's sitting, and as he's sitting in meditation, his mind keeps on dropping off into sleep. He's dozing. And there's a comment here from the commentary which says that while he was depending on the village for alms, he had been practicing meditation in the grove. And during those 7 days, he had been energetically engaged in walking meditation. And because of the effort, he became fatigued. And so when he was sitting at the end of his walkway, sitting for meditation, he kept on dozing off.
Bhante, we're not seeing the screen. Are you not sharing your screen?
I can see Bante's screen.
No, we can see the screen.
Yeah, we can see the screen, Bante.
Well,
We can't see the screen, Bhante.
sorry, it's just me then, huh?
Oh. I think maybe you have to move something on your screen because everybody else seems to be seeing it. And I'm sharing it.
Thank you, I got it.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. And what's interesting, there's another group of suttas, which I just thought of earlier, that just came to mind. It's in the Samyutta Nikaya, which also shows that Moggallana had trouble with his meditation during this period. Let me see if I could find it quickly. It's in Samyutta Nikaya, the 4th section. There's a chapter called the Moggallana Samyutta. chapter 40. Yeah, Moggallana, in this group of suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya, Moggallana explains how he was entered and dwelt in the first jhana, but when he was dwelling in the first jhana, then thoughts and ideas connected with sensual desire started to assail or attack his mind. And then the Buddha came to him by means of psychic power and said, do not be negligent regarding the first jhana, steady your mind on the jhana, unify your mind, concentrate your mind on the first jhana. And then he says, on a later occasion, then I entered and dwelt in the first jhana, and I attained stability in the first jhana. And then a similar thing happens with the second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, base of the infinity of space, infinity of consciousness, the base of nothingness, up to the base of neither perception nor non-perception, and then what's called the signless concentration of mind. So he says, I entered and dwelt in the signless concentration of mind, but while I was dwelling thus, my mind became sort of drawn away or pulled away by attention to signs, to other objects. And then the Buddha came to me by means of psychic power and told me to steady my mind, steady your mind on the signless concentration, unify your mind on the signless concentration, focus on the signless concentration, and then on a later occasion, he attained stability in the signless concentration. And so even Moggallana, who has become such a great disciple, had struggles and problems with his meditation, drowsiness here, obstacles, and according to the other sutta. And so we shouldn't become despondent and discouraged when we have problems with our own practice. Okay, so coming back to this particular sutta, and so we're told that while Moggallana was dozing off, the Buddha, using his divine eye, saw Moggallana sitting and dozing off, and then using his own psychic power, he disappeared from the deer park of Basicala Grove and reappeared in front of Moggallana. And then he gave Moggallana some advice on how to deal with drowsiness. And so these, you would say, are methods for dealing with, in the 5 hindrances, we have the third hindrance is tina middha. Actually, 2 factors which are combined here. Tina is something like stiffness or rigidity of mind or tightness of mind. And middha is more properly drowsiness. Or tina is like dullness of the mind, and middha is drowsiness. So what happens in meditation, the way in my own experience, first the mind becomes dull, not able to focus well, not able to remain steady on the object. And it's a little bit like I know, like the weather we've been having here in the Boston area the last few days, where the sky is covered over like these gray clouds with a little drizzling rain. So that is my image of Tina. It's like the mind is covered over with not the heavy rain clouds, but these dull gray clouds which send out a little drizzling like rain. So that is Tina, dullness of the mind. And Mida is the drowsiness, not the normal sleepiness which comes with the proper time to go to sleep, but it's when you've been fresh and vigorous, energetic, middle of the day, and then because the mind becomes dull, then one starts to drop off, to become drowsy, and to doze off. And so that's the situation that Moggallana had found himself in. And so now the Buddha gives him some advice on how to overcome this drowsiness. And we'll see whether these actually turn out to be useful. So first, the Buddha says that you shouldn't attend to the object that you were using when you became drowsy, but you should, with this, it seems what's implied here is that you should turn to some other meditation object. Though it's not stated explicitly, but you don't attend to the object that caused you to become drowsy, but turn to some other object, something that will give more energy or vigor to the mind. And so what kind of object would tend to make you feel drowsy?
Breath.
Say again?
I think breath sometimes because it becomes so subtle that you kind of lose it.
I think that is probably the common one. That is the focus on mindfulness of breathing, because it's a rather it's a rather boring object. So you're just paying attention, in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. Yeah, so I think mindfulness of breathing can make one become drowsy. I don't have any experience, not much experience with kasina meditation. This is where you take a disc. Usually what's used when people are doing meditation, the kasina meditation will be the earth kasina, which will be like a circle, which is filled in with clay or soil to represent the earth. Or probably what's more popular nowadays would be the color kasina. So this would be a disc which will be colored blue, red, yellow, or white, just one solid color. And you just sit there just focusing on, say, a blue kasina, blue, 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 blue. I have a PhD in philosophy, and for this I have to just focus on blue, 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 blue. Yeah, so if one is, I think if one is sort of a naturally gifted meditator, the kasinas are said to be a very powerful but a bit dangerous path to samadhi. Dangerous because what I'm told happens when people do kasina meditation without skilled guidance is that the mind can start projecting images onto the kasina involuntarily. Sometimes it will be very sensual images, like for a young monk, a male monk, maybe images of beautiful girls coming out of the blue of the casino and enticing him. Or sometimes the casino object can turn into scary faces, which will frighten the meditator. And I've heard actually, I don't want to scare anybody, but of some meditators in Sri Lanka, monks, who, without skilled advice, did the casino meditation, and they went a bit mad from doing it. But anyway, the non-dangerous consequence of the casino meditation, because it involves just focusing upon a single, very simple object, is that one gets drowsy. And so to focus on another object, what has been advised to break up the drowsiness, what I've been instructed. Excuse me, I have to get a little water. Yeah, if the mind is getting drowsy, what I've been instructed to do is to choose certain touch points of the body, and one runs through those touch points, just putting the mindfulness on each in quick succession. For example, okay, I'm sitting, so there is the left buttock, right buttock, the right knee, the left knee, and then the place where the hands are touching, where I have one hand over the other. And so I would move quickly, attending to the sensation, left buttock, right knee, left knee, touch of the hands, then back, left buttock, right knee, left knee, touch, sensation of the hands. And keep on going through that over and over and over. And then when you do that, it helps to, you're sustaining the mindfulness, but because you have to attend quickly to a number of changing objects, the mind regains its alertness. Then once you regain the alertness, then you can go back to the primary object. Okay, so this we could say would be, maybe if I could project into the text, so I would say that the Buddha is saying, don't cultivate that object, like the breath or the casino object, but choose another object that will arouse or generate more energy. Yeah, another idea would fade into the second advice. And this is here, the Buddha says, you should ponder, examine, and mentally inspect the Dhamma as you have heard it and learned it. So
Yes, Bhante, I was going to say the same thing. It's the Dhamma. If you're getting drowsy, in my case, I usually deviate to the Dhamma. So that second method worked for me.
To do some reflection on the Dhamma.
Yes, Bhante, it was fantastic.
How would you do that?
Well, I was starting with Buddhaguna, the qualities of the Buddha.
Okay.
And then going through that, then the Dhamma, the Sangha. And then I wouldn't let my mind sit idly. I would go into either Paticcasamuppada or the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment I found was very, very fruitful.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Good to have.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I think death recollection is very good for me when just death recollection, that urgency, that you're going to die any minute.
Yeah.
So the mind will come back.
That would be, I think that would come maybe under the first. What one could do is, this would be the recollection of death, or the mindfulness of death. So you could recollect that death is absolutely inescapable, inevitable, certain, definite, inevitable, inescapable, the arrival of death, absolutely unpredictable. And in that way, it will generate a sense of urgency. And in fact, there's maybe this would become under the reflection on the Dhamma. There is a set of items. It appears not to occur in the canon, but it's mentioned in the commentaries. It's called the Atta Sangvega Vatu. That is the 8 themes for generating that sense of urgency. So what are the 8 themes? It's a reflection: birth. Of course, it's not our present birth, but it's a prospect of the next birth, the future birth. Then old age, illness, and death. So those are the 4 primary. Then comes the plane of misery. That's the bad destinations. So this is bringing to mind the prospect of rebirth in the hell realms, the animal realm, and the realm of the pretas, or afflicted spirits. So that's especially an incentive for avoiding unwholesome karma, because you don't want to fall into the bad destinations. And you want to escape the possibility of a plunge into the bad destinations. So that is the 5th. Then comes reflection on all of the dukkha, or suffering, that one has encountered in one's past migration through samsara. Then reflection on the future suffering one might meet within samsara. This is the anagatam dukkham. So that's 7. We covered 7 so far. And then the 8th, interestingly, is the search for food in the present. And it doesn't seem immediately to be a little puzzling, but when you consider all the steps that you have to go through to acquire food, to consume food, you have to, the primary purpose, working at a job to earn money, at least to have a place to live, to support a family, and to purchase food. And in many of the undeveloped countries, people probably spend 50% of their income on food. Okay, and then not only spending the money on the food, you have to go to the market, the supermarket. And these days in Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, so much variety. In the old days, you used to go to the grocery store, the store where they sell the breads, the pastry, what do they call this? The shop where they sell breads, the bakery, the grocery store, the bakery. And then, of course, my mother would go to the meat market or fish market. And there very simple to buy food. But now you go to these supermarkets with so much variety. It's very confusing. So then you have to buy the food, cook the food, eat it, digest it. So that's the dukkha concern involved in the search for food. Okay, so those, I would put that under reflection on the Dhamma. Okay, then comes the 3rd method, and this is reciting the Dhamma as you have heard it and learned it. So if you can't dispel the drowsiness by reflecting on the Dhamma, then you can recite some texts. I have to say, I don't like these methods so much. When I'm doing meditation, my thought is always, I just want to do meditation. I don't want to recite text. But perhaps in earlier times, this was used as an effective method. So certain texts that you might have memorized, or you can have a little booklet like Mirror of the Dhamma, one of the recitation books, and then you can recite some texts. And that should help to dispel the drowsiness. Okay, the fourth method suggested here. I've tried this in the past. I haven't had success with it. I don't know if anybody else has. So this is pulling your earlobes and rubbing the limbs with your hands. Has anybody tried this?
It works for a very short time, Bhante. I tried that, and for a very few minutes, you lose the I lose the drowsiness, but then it comes back.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah. I might have tried it long ago in the past. I don't remember doing it recently. Okay, now the fifth method. Okay, so this is you get up from your seat and you rub your eyes with water, or actually you could rub your whole face, especially with cold water, really cold water. And then it says, survey all the quarters and look up at the constellations and the stars. Living in the city these days, at night, you don't see many constellations and stars, but in ancient India, where the pre-industrial era, where we don't have air pollution, smog covering up the sky, then it would be very easy to look up and see many thousands and thousands of stars and constellations. But I say, if somebody really has a trouble with drowsiness, if they're on their own, not in a group or with a meditation retreat, then a good method, especially if they're doing intensive meditation, is to take a cold shower, because the cold water helps to break up the drowsiness. Or in Sri Lanka, we didn't have the shower stalls, but we had the wells. So we go to the well and you get a bucket of the cold water from the well and pour it over the head, and it will help to dispel the drowsiness. Okay, then the sixth method, this is what is often recommended in many texts as the antidote to tina mida, to dullness and drowsiness. And this is attending to the perception of light. Or here it's called also the perception of day. And so what this means is that you take a bright light. And so if it's at the daytime, you can look up briefly at the sun. Don't stare at the sun for a long time. At night, if there's a full moon, you could look up at the disk of the full moon or near full moon, get an image of the bright moon. Or if you have a candle flame, you could look at the candle flame, or an electric light, a light bulb. You get the image of light. And then you bring that image of light into your meditation, or you could just do this entirely through imagination, to imagine a ball of bright light, like a light of like the ball of the sun, bright and luminous. And even if it's night, but you're just focusing on the bright light, and as you focus on the bright light, the brightness suffuses the mind and drives away the dullness and the drowsiness. The dullness and drowsiness, as I said before, that's like those gray clouds on a drizzly day, and then focusing on the perception of light is like a wind comes and blows the clouds away, and you're able to see the sun. And so in this way, by focusing on the image of a light, then the mind becomes imbued with luminosity, with radiance. And in that way, the drowsiness is dispelled. And then the seventh method that's suggested here is, in this case, this is when I think when the drowsiness is really heavy and persistent, but you don't need sleep. You don't really need sleep. So in that case, you break the sitting posture, and then you do the vigorous walking meditation, not the very slow walking meditation, but being mindful of walking back and forth, paying attention maybe to the touch sensation of the feet, just the touch of the feet against the floor or the ground, right, left, right, left, right, left. I don't know what's quite meant perceiving what is behind and what is in front, but really you're just perceiving what's in front of you, but the eyes are downcast. But you have enough awareness of what's in front of you that you don't crash into a wall or into some other object. So you do this vigorous walking meditation. And since you're focusing mindfully on the process of walking, you're still generating mindfulness and building up the force of samadhi or concentration. And then once you dispel the drowsiness, you could walk vigorously back and forth 15, 20 minutes. Then when you feel you're ready, then you can go back to the sitting meditation. Or you could continue with the walking meditation. You use the vigorous, fast walking meditation to get rid of the drowsiness. Then you can slow down and then do the slow, mindful walking meditation. And then comes another suggestion. It seems that this sutta might have been put into the book of eights because there's an eighth suggestion. And that is when, after you've been walking back and forth vigorously, if still the drowsiness, you can't dispel the drowsiness, then it's okay. The Buddha says, okay, you lie down on the right side in the lion's posture. That is, with one foot overlaps the other. You're mindful, clearly comprehending. And here it says, after noting in your mind the idea of rising, but nowadays with your cell phone, you could set your cell phone, the timer for the cell phone, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You just allow yourself to get a little nap, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, not more than an hour, maybe 40 minutes is good. And then when you awaken, you get up quickly and you're determined, I'm not going to just submit to sleepiness. And then you get up and then you resume your meditation. So these are actually 8 methods that the Buddha recommended for dispelling drowsiness. And now the sutta continues. There are some interesting passages here. First, he says that we will not approach families for alms with a head swollen with pride. That's how you should train yourself. And then he says that sometimes a monk might approach families if he has a mind swollen with pride, and sometimes he turns up and people don't pay attention to him. And then the monk might get angry and think these people have turned against me, they've now become indifferent to me. and then he feels humiliated, he becomes restless and agitated and loses his restraint. Yeah, so you have to, when going on alms round, you have to do so with a humble mind. And sometimes if people are busy in the house, they don't pay attention, then you just stand there for a minute or so, waiting patiently, sending the thoughts of loving kindness. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be safe. And if nobody comes out to offer alms, then you just move on to the next house. Okay, then the Buddha advises Moggallana, don't engage in contentious talk, because when there's contentious talk, then you get involved in excessive words, and then the mind becomes restless, and one loses one's restraint. And for this reason, too, it's good not only to avoid contentious talk, verbal talk, also avoid getting involved in too much contentious exchanges of opinions on the internet, whether about worldly matters or about Dhamma matters. So sometimes I've peeked into some of these Dhamma chat rooms, and sometimes the atmosphere can get very heated. People sometimes denouncing each other. You don't understand the Dhamma. I understand the Dhamma. If you join these chat rooms, of course, you could offer your opinion, but if somebody responds in a heated way, in a contentious way, don't get sucked into the debate, but just send your thought of loving kindness and pass on. Okay, I just want to move quickly to the last part of this sutta, which is very important. So here, Moggallana asked the Buddha, how is a monk liberated through the extinction or destruction of craving? Actually, this phrase in the Pali actually comes last. I don't know why I put it here earlier. If I were to redo this translation, I would put this at the end. So how is he liberated through the destruction of craving? One who has reached the ultimate conclusion, the ultimate goal, who has won the ultimate yoga kama, security from bondage, lived the ultimate brahmacharya, the ultimate spiritual life, gained the ultimate consummation. I think I put in the Pali here. Yeah, achanta pariyosana, the ultimate consummation, the ultimate conclusion, the ultimate goal. And then comes Sato Deva Manusanang, best among deities and human beings. And then the Buddha replies, he says, here a monk has heard, nothing is worth holding to. Very, very powerful expression. Do you see the Pali of the text?
Yes, Bhante, but it's very small, the font. Yeah, we can see it.
I'm going to increase it.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, it's a very good, in Pali, it's very, very powerful expression. Sabbe Dhamma nalang abhinivesaya. And so the commentary explains by all Dhammas is meant anything within the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense bases, or the 18 elements. So the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind faculty, visible forms, sounds, odors, tastes, textures, and mental objects, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. That is the all, includes everything. And none of that is worth clinging to with craving or with wrong views. And so the text goes on, when a monk has heard nothing is worth holding to, then one directly knows all things. And the verb used here is abhijanati. And in the commentarial system, this has a somewhat technical sense of knowing things by way of their specific characteristic. So when exploring in meditation and insight meditation, the 5 aggregates, for example, one is able to identify the characteristics first of material form. And then in regard to material form, one is able to directly identify the characteristics of the earth element, which has the properties of, we could say, hardness and softness. The water element, which has the property of flowing and cohesion. The fire element, which has the property positively of heat, negatively of coolness, the spectrum of hot and cool. And the wind element or air element, the property of motion, or sometimes expansion and contraction. And then one turns to feeling. Feeling has the property of experiencing the felt tone or quality of the object, pleasurable, painful, neutral. Identify the property of sanya, perception, the ability to the function of noting the features of objects, the property of chaitana or sankhara, of willing, determining, the property of consciousness, the awareness arising based on a sense faculty, knowing the object. And so in that way, you hone in on the specific characteristics of one's experience. In this way, doing so through the 5 aggregates. And then from direct knowledge, one moves to the next phase of contemplation, which is full understanding. This is parijanati. Okay, so the commentaries explain by, you see, both words, abhijanati, parijanati, are based on the verb janati, which means to know. Abhi has more the sense of directness. Pari has more a sense of fullness. So in the commentary system, this means that you move on from the knowing the specific characteristics of things to knowing the general characteristics. So that would be observing by way of anicca, dukkha, anatta, by way of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. And then the Buddha gives a specific sort of narrowing the focus down to feeling. So he says, whatever feeling one feels, whether pleasant, painful, or neutral, one dwells contemplating impermanence in those feelings. That's anicca, contemplating fading away. This is viraga, contemplating cessation in these feelings. This is nirodha. And it seems that these first three terms indicate three different aspects, really, of impermanence, but maybe they're indicating at subtler levels. So contemplating impermanence maybe is just the general sense of things arising and vanishing, arising and vanishing. When you move to viraga, so this is anicca, here we come to viraga. I would say that now the focus shifts from arising and vanishing. One discards the arising aspect and just focuses on the vanishing of things. This perhaps would correspond to, in the system of insight knowledges, bhanga jnana, seeing the dissolution, destruction of things. So everything is just, every moment just breaking up and dissolving, breaking up and dissolving, breaking up and dissolving. And then the third, more potent stage of impermanence is nirodha, cessation, that when things break up and dissolve, they cease, they no longer exist. So you're seeing whatever feeling one is experiencing, pleasant, painful, neutral, it has stopped, it's ceased. And then the fourth contemplation is patinissagga. And this seems to be more the response to the perception of impermanence, fading away and cessation, relinquishment. That is, one is giving up the attachment or the clinging to the things that one usually clings to, because you see that they're all breaking up and vanishing and ceasing, and so one has no more attachment to them. So one relinquishes those things. And so the text continues, as he dwells contemplating impermanence, etc., he doesn't cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, he is not agitated, but the verb here is a difficult verb to translate, is paritasati in Pali, which is related to two other words. One suggests craving, and the other suggests fear. So it's hard to find one English word that can capture a word that encompasses both craving and fear. So I used agitated. But if you go into the Pali, you could see how we have this word with two connotations. And then being unagitated, pachatang parinibhayati. Personally, he attains nibbana. This would be the nibbana element without residue. I'm saying the nibbana element with a residue remaining. That is the attainment of nibbana visible in this life itself through the eradication of the defilements. And then comes the reflective understanding, destroyed or finished as birth. The brahmacharya, the spiritual life, has been lived. Kattang karaniyang, what had to be done has been done, and there is no coming back to any state of being. And then the Buddha just concludes by saying, it's in this way that a monk is, again, I'll use the order of the Pali, is one who has reached the ultimate conclusion, won the ultimate security from bondage, lived the ultimate spiritual life, gained the ultimate consummation or goal, and has become best among devas and humans. Okay, so this can do with our survey of the sutta. If anybody has questions or comments, let me get the question box. You can use the hand symbol. Okay, so I see Thomas first.
Yes, Bhante, thank you so much for your instruction. I have a difficulty in an antithetical idea of having a system of meditation, a method of system of meditation, because with that method, how are you supposed to find freedom? That is not freedom. I see here the mind is one without restraint, is far from concentration, but isn't restraining confining. There should be no. I mean, I also find, like, I don't know, some idiocy behind you have to desirelessness. I don't quite get that though. I find, like, with the sleeping, not to implement any method at all, but just to watch those sleepy feelings, like it's almost like a puffy cloud. And when I look at that, then that drowsiness disappears. So in my practices, I'm having trouble, but I realize maybe you do have to have a system, but within a system it becomes mechanical, dull, and there is no freedom in a system.
No, not at all. Yeah, of course, a system can become artificial, mechanical, but these are, let's say, they're more like pragmatic tools to use. And so what's interesting, and I think what's important in the sutta, is that the Buddha doesn't lay down just one method for dealing with drowsiness, but he gives a variety of methods. And so what you have to do is experiment with these different methods and see what works. And also the method that you just mentioned, I have actually found that to be useful myself, even though it's not mentioned here. And that is, in fact, this is also what you just mentioned is included in the method of the Satipatthana Sutta. That when you're drowsy, you know you are drowsy. You turn back and you observe the drowsy mind, and then you watch it, continuously watch it. And when you're watching the drowsy mind, then you're sort of activating the awareness so that with persistence, then the drowsiness gets dispelled. Yeah, and restraint, let's see what he says about restraint here. Oh, I see. Okay. When there is when one is restless, one loses one's restraint. Yeah, this is the restraint of keeping the mind calm and focused. So when one gets entangled, say, in quarrels, disputes, debates, then the mind becomes restless. And then when it gets restless, then the mind just runs off in every direction. And so restraint means drawing the mind in to keep it settled and focused, which is important. Okay, we'll have to move on and take more questions. So next comes Chaya, and you unmute.
Thank you for the teaching, Bhante. In the sutta, the eighth method that the Buddha mentioned to have a nap, the position he lays down, lie on the right side of the lion, in the lion's posture with one foot overlapping the other. I'm just wondering, Bhante, is there a significance in this particular posture and not any other posture?
Yeah, I think this is recommended by the Buddha in quite a number of suttas. I think maybe because, I don't know why. Maybe because it enables one to maintain maybe to get up after one's sleep is over. Yeah, I just don't know why. It's recommended often, but I don't know why.
But I think, Bhante, because in that posture, you're not falling to sleep or preparing for sleep. You're just resting and your mind is alert. I think that's the reason Buddha usually used that posture. I used to see my dad used to, when he was just not sleeping, but he's resting, he would lie down in the same posture.
Yeah, maybe so that you could lie down, you get the rest without falling into sleep. But also the Buddha does mention in the other passages that I have in mind, which is about the monk meditating through the night. So he says in the first watch of the night, he continues to do the meditation, sitting and walking. In the last watch of the night, again, he does the sitting and walking meditation. But in the middle watch of the night, then it says, and he uses the same phrase, he lies down on the right side in the lion's posture, one leg overlapping the other, mindful and clearly comprehending, bearing in mind the time for rising. So apparently there one is falling asleep, but one is doing it in the lion's posture. But maybe it sort of signifies in some way maintaining that mindfulness even in sleep. Okay, we'll have to move on with the questions. So next will be Nabarun.
Thank you, Bhante. My question is relating to the last part where we have the abhinyati and the higher understandings, but it is related to the flow in the Madhupindika Sutta, where we see that it's feeling which leads to Vedana, and Vedana which leads. The question for me is like a confusion which I have relating to the Madhupindika Sutta, where we find the term Sanjanati.
Yeah.
And there we see that it's contact which leads to Vedana, and Vedana which leads to Sanjanati, and then Vitaka. My question is that when contact happens, like there is, as I understand, a neutral feeling when it is relating to eye or nose, or the only feelings which are tactile and mental, that leads to the three kinds of feelings. But the other five would give you a neutral feeling only when Sanya comes in. Then it gives you the other three kinds of feeling. That's kind of my understanding. So is there a Sanya which is coming before the feeling happens? Like, is the why feeling is there, and then is there supposed to be a Sanya? There has to be any Sanyanati before then the other feelings can come, or it has been put because of only those two? Because in case of tactile, there could be like a feeling without the sanya. It's a direct contact of unpleasantness. So is this the reason, or is there anything else that you could see into it? Because
yeah, it seems to me in that Madhupindika Sutta a little bit artificial to say that depending on feeling, there is perception. Because the relationship between feeling and perception very, very complex. So I think just for the sake of neatness of exposition, it said that in dependence on feeling, there is perception. But I know in many, many situations, depending on perception, there is feeling. So the relationship is very complex. I wouldn't take that to be applicable in every situation.
okay. And so you're suggesting that we could read it both ways in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, we'll have time for one more question, and this is rhythmic freedom.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. Could you please repeat the in the 8 contemplations to combat drowsiness that started with birth, aging, sickness, and death? The 5th one was the realms of misery, planes of misery, and the 8th was the acquisition of food. But could you repeat the 6th and 7th? Thank you.
Okay, so the 6th, these are actually, they're given not explicitly as the means to dispel drowsiness, but they're called Sangvega Vatu, which means the means of arousing a sense of urgency. But when you get that sense of urgency, then it will help to remove laziness or drowsiness. Okay, so just to go through, the first is birth, old age, sickness, death. The 5th is the suffering in the plane of misery. Then the 6th is the dukkha that we've experienced during our past migration through samsara. Then the 7th is the suffering that lies ahead for us as we go into our future migrations in samsara. And then the 8th is the suffering bound up with the quest for food.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, I think we'll have to end now for the day. And so we'll end with the sharing, the dedication of the merits. So I'll recite the verse for sharing the merit with the devas, the nagas, and the other beings. Akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu sasanam. Akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu desanam. Akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu mang parang. Dukha patachani dukha baya patachani baya soka patachani soka hantu sabe pipanino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And then I'll also dedicate the merit of our teaching and discussion today to my ailing first Buddhist teacher, the Venerable Thich Duk, in the hospital in Boston. Okay, we could end with 3 mental bows to the Buddha, since I'm not at the Buddhist temple right now. So we'll do 1 bow, 2nd bow, 3rd bow.
Thank you,
And a bow to
Bhante.
Bhante Bodhi. Thank you, Bhante Bodhi.
Thank you,
our
Bhante.
teacher.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you,
Thank
Bante.
you,
Thank you,
Bante.
Bante.
Many,
Thank
many
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bante.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bante.
Bante.
Your
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante.
Please take care of your health,
Thank you,
Bante.
Yeah, okay, thank
Thank
you.
you,
Yeah.
Bante.
Well,
Sayonara,
and
Bante.
we'll pray
Be
for your
well.
pray for your friend and teacher
Yeah.
for peaceful passing.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bante.
Bante. Thank you,
Teruan
Bante.
Sarnay
you.
Namo Buddhaya.
Tawasanay.
Thank you, Bante. Take care, Bante.